integral education has gone through three formative periods. First period was from 1893 to 1910. When Sri Aurobindo came back to India in 1893 and started working in the Baroda State Service, from behind the scenes, he was also preparing a political movement towards India's freedom. At the same time, he was also teaching French and English at Baroda College and soon became its vice principal. He gave great importance to the role of education in social transformation. During this period, he was able to play a decisive role with the help of Lokmanya Tilak in formulating the four objectives of the freedom movement in India: Swaraj, Swadeshi, boycott, and national education. In 1905, when the agitation against the partition of Bengal broke out, he gave up the Baroda service and joined the political movement openly. He left Baroda in 1906 and went to Calcutta and became the principal of the newly founded Bengal National College. He had been disgusted with the education given by the British system in Indian schools, colleges, and universities, a system of which, as a professor in the Baroda College, he had the full experience. The national education movement began well, and many national schools were established in Bengal, and many able men became teachers. But still, the development was insufficient, and the economical position of the schools precarious. Sri Aurobindo took up the movement personally and wanted to give it a greater expansion and a stronger foundation. In February 1910, he began writing a series of essays called A System of National Education in the Karma Yoga. These were only preliminary ideas. However, in the middle of the series, he had to abruptly leave Calcutta for Chandarnagar to avoid imminent arrest by the British government. With his departure from Bengal and the repression of the freedom movement and the general depression caused by it, most of the schools failed to survive. With that, the first period came to an end, and the name integral education had not yet emerged. The second period was from 1910 to 1940. After reaching Pondicherry, Sri Aurobindo had plans to go back. However, that was not meant to happen. Already by 1910, he had major spiritual realizations and transformations. He saw that the freedom of India was only a step on the way. There was a larger mission encompassing the whole of humanity. There was an evolutionary crisis unfolding in the world. The nations were marching towards becoming independent, and the global techno-industrial civilization was shaping up without a greater vision other than their national self-interests. He saw that the emerging complexity was way beyond the scope of the human mind to comprehend or manage. Only a greater consciousness beyond the mind could save humanity from self-destruction. He was exploring and establishing in himself the ranges of consciousness beyond the human mind. In this process, he learned that the range of consciousness, which he called supermind, was necessary to be established on Earth if humanity was to successfully cross over the evolutionary crisis. And in fact, the crisis on Earth was a veiled process of the manifestation of supermind. The years that followed were of an intense tapasya towards supramental manifestation on Earth. We can get some glimpses of this work from his epic poem Savitri. He wrote, "Apart he lived in his mind's solitude, a demigod shaping the lives of men. One soul's ambition lifted up the race. A power worked, but none knew whence it came. The universal strengths were linked with his, fulfilling Earth's smallness with their boundless breadths. He drew the energies that transmute an age." In 1914, the mother, his spiritual collaborator, who was also independently working towards the same mission, will join him. The same year, he started publishing his major works in a monthly called Arya, detailing out his vision, the process of transformation, the psychology of social development, and the ideal of human unity. Meanwhile, the nations of the world will go through the destructive convulsions of the First World War and the Spanish flu pandemic. In the last two issues of Arya, during 1920 and 21, he will once again touch upon the topic of national education, clarifying many misconceptions. He brings forth the idea of the nation's soul as distinct from the political nation states or the national egos. He gave a central role to the idea of nation soul in the national education, not just for India, but for all the nations of the world. In the movement towards becoming a global civilization, the nation souls are to play a major role if humanity is to avoid getting mechanized and standardized into a single global state that would otherwise destroy the cultural diversity of the world. With the mother's arrival, Sri Aurobindo Ashram will take shape, creating a unique laboratory of consciousness pioneering human evolution. The ashram will remain highly focused and intense in its effort of yogic research and transformation of consciousness, applying the process of integral yoga and mapping the vast terrains of consciousness which laid the foundations for integral psychology. This was the period of forming the nucleus of transformation. The third period was from 1940 to 1973. The onslaught of the Second World War showed the dark side of the national ego, parading as nationalism in the form of Hitler's Germany and its disastrous consequences to the world. As many people who were closely associated with the Mother and Sri Aurobindo took refuge in the ashram along with their children during the war, the Mother started a school on 2nd December 1943 and became herself one of its teachers. Since then, the school has continued to grow and experiment with various educational problems and issues. On the occasion of India's independence in 1947, Sri Aurobindo shared his 5 dreams in a message to the nation. Beyond India's freedom and the resurgence of Asia, he wrote about his 3rd dream of a world union, struggling against tremendous difficulties, unfolding towards its realization, forming the outer basis of a fairer, brighter, and nobler life for all mankind. He saw that a new spirit of oneness will take hold of the human race, and a voluntary fusion of cultures will emerge. His 4th dream was the spiritual gift of India to the world, which had already begun and will grow as more and more eyes were turning towards India with hope and increasing resort not only to her teachings but also to her psychic and spiritual practices. His final and 5th dream was a step in evolution which would raise man to a higher and larger consciousness, bringing individual perfection and a perfect society. He wrote, "If this evolution is to take place, since it must proceed through a growth of the spirit and the inner consciousness, the initiative can come from India. And although the scope must be universal, the central movement may be hers." Towards the realization of these dreams, soon Sri Aurobindo and the mother began planning an international university in Pondicherry. However, Sri Aurobindo left his body on 5th of December 1950. To give a concrete shape to his vision, a convention was held in Pondicherry in 1951, which resolved to establish an international university center in the town as a fitting memorial to Sri Aurobindo. Accordingly, the Sri Aurobindo International University Center was inaugurated by the mother on January 6, 1952. During this period, the mother will write a series of articles outlining the broad contours of integral education in a language that is easily accessible to the general public. She also wrote a 3-part article called An International University Center in the Ashram Bulletin. She explained that the International University Center will be international, not because students from all countries will be admitted there, not even because they will be taught in their own language, but above all, because the cultures of the various parts of the world will be represented and accessible to all. She wanted global cultural synthesis, and towards this the creation of cultural pavilions of all the nations in her university. In 1954, the mother published a seminal document called A Dream, giving a vivid vision of the ideal society she wanted to realize. 1956 was a pivotal year in her work when the long-awaited supramental consciousness manifested on Earth on February 29th, opening a whole new evolutionary possibility. Soon she wanted to create a township embracing the full complexity of human life to give it a new orientation. In 1959, the mother renamed the Sri Aurobindo International University Center into Sri Aurobindo International Center of Education. In 1960, she will form Sri Aurobindo Society to make known the aims and ideals of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, their system of integral yoga, and to work for its fulfillment in all possible ways, and for the attainment of a spiritualized society as envisaged by Sri Aurobindo. Meanwhile, her idea of an ideal society in the form of an ideal city will soon take shape, and she gives it the name Auroville. On February 28th of 1968, she will inaugurate Auroville. During the inauguration, youth from 124 different nations and 23 Indian states deposited a handful of their native soil in a marble urn, a symbolic lotus bud. The Charter of Auroville declared Auroville to be the place of an unending education, of constant progress, and a youth that never ages. Mother's vision, articulated in the document, a dream, became Auroville's ideal, and the city was conceived in the form of a galaxy, with Matri Mandir, the soul of Auroville, at the center. She integrated the idea of the pavilions of the world's cultures, representing nation souls, into the conception of Auroville, to give birth to a universal culture resulting from the voluntary fusion of all cultures from the world. The mother left her body in 1973, and her work continues to unfold in spite of all the difficulties on the way. Today, in 2020, Auroville has more than 3,200 people from 59 countries, living in an area spread over more than 3,500 acres of regenerated land, building a learning society. Meanwhile, many other educational centers have emerged across India and the world, inspired by the vision of the Mother and Sri Aurobindo. On 15th of August 2022, we will have the 150th birth anniversary of Sri Aurobindo. We invite you all to join hands and replenish our energies, to go forward with renewed aspiration towards the dream they have given us. Thank you.